Today is Monday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, just after 2 p.m. EST. What is that, 6 p.m. UTC? And we have with us today, again, our in-house TradFi boomer, Tolga Gutierrez. Marty, Media Marty, the man of many hats, president of the Brazilian Tourist Board. Jason Jensen, a resident Trent warrior.
Jam.
The coziest cat on this side of the metaverse.
We should have started this call like a little later and had some margaritas. I didn't even think about that, that it was 5th of May.
I didn't realize it either until I just said that. So now, like, all plans have changed for after this call. I'm now, like, getting tacos tonight, getting margaritas.
Oh, man.
I bet you the only Mexican place in Rio is full as fuck with gringos. 100%. Like, Super Bowl is insane, and fucking the Mexican joint on Cinco de Mayo is just full of fucking gringos.
Fucking hilarious.
We had fucking Lady Gaga, like 2 million people on the beach, so the fucking city is full of people, full of the peeps.
No, I don't want to go on a sidebar, but I discovered something today, and inadvertently it relates to Cinco de Mayo. My wife bought a Dominican Republic avocado versus ones we've been buying from, like, I guess Haas, or like they come from Mexico. Mm-hmm. The Dominican ones are like 3 times the size as like a Mexican avocado. I guess I kind of knew about this. I thought they were just maybe a different like type of avocado. It's exactly the same. It tastes exactly the same. Nothing's different. Why are we buying tiny little avocados when we can buy grapefruit size?
Are they a little more watery?
Maybe.
Avocado shaming. Why are you, as a man, buying avocados from Mexico when you can get 3 avocados from Ecuador?
Yeah, they're like 3 times the size. I don't know.
No, we have this in Brazil, but they're a little more watery. So when you make guacamole, it's a little too watery. Yeah, they're like 2 pounds. The seed is the size of a house fucking avocado.
I had half the avocado, and I made 3 avocado toasts out of it, and I still had the other half, and I didn't even know what to do with it.
Dude, the fucking stores in New York need to figure this out and just use DR fucking avocados and stretch their margins, dude.
Note to everyone: don't buy those little dinky ones from Mexico.
Yeah, we call them abacachi. Abacachi. It's like it's like fucking 2 pounds, dude. It's gigantic.
Oh, it's great. It was such a relief to see that. I was like, I told my wife, like, you're buying.
If you didn't know why we're talking about avocados right now, it relates to risk, right?
Avocado chain is the back risk.
Avocado farming risk.
Yeah, avocado farming risk and being shamed by men like Tolga who buy larger avocados. But today's
avocado envy, right?
Avocado envy. Today's community presentation, we're focusing on the risk engine, liquidation system, and we'll touch on portfolio margin a bit more. If you did not, or if you weren't around last week for our last presentation on portfolio margin, you can check our YouTube at Premia Finance. I got to change that to Premia Blue now for the recording of that. But with no further ado, I will hand this over to Tolga to get started. Boom. So what is Kyan? Let's first set the groundwork here. What is Kyan Exchange? Right now, we're under a Premia account. We've been talking about Premia a bunch. People know us from Premia. So let's dive into this. What is Kyan? Kyan Exchange is V4, our magnus opus, if you will. An options and perpetuals futures exchange. Transparent like a DEX with portfolio margin and combo trades. If you were on Eden this morning, I gave a leak. You guys got to see some of the UI and how the combo trades could potentially work. But Tolga, go ahead, dive into this a bit for us.
Yeah, and we also did combo trades last week. So there was a lot that we covered in depth on combo trades, the benefits, kind of the nuances of how to build a combo trade and different ways you can do it in our system. Like Cozy mentioned, this is there's going to be some overlap from the previous community calls, but what we're essentially doing is we're just like building upon the material and sort of just adding new information incrementally so it's a little bit easier to digest, and then giving refreshers about different topics that we've covered in other calls just in case you missed them. We'll kind of briefly touch on different areas such as margin, how like the initial margin ratio works, account structures in our system, and then we'll kind of highlight today the unique information will be about liquidations, liquidation flow, how liquidations occur in our system. There is also another call that we did, I think last week with Block Shoals, which was a really good one, with Andrew from Block Shoals, and we covered sort of the Oracle aspect. So we won't touch too much on that today, but that's obviously indirectly related to how liquidations are determined. We'll kind of touch on that as we go through. So let's get started. Let's see, where are we at here? Portfolio margin primer. All right. So as we talked about portfolio margin in the past, essentially portfolio margin is a risk-based system, right? And so we offer leverage to users by risk. So the less risky your portfolio is, the more leverage you get. The more risky your portfolio is, the less leverage you get. In our system somewhere, I guess in a way that people can kind of understand, leverage based on the capital that you have can range anywhere from, say, 6x to 30 to 40x in our system. Obviously, 30 or 40x leverage comes with reduced exposure portfolios, ones that are probably delta neutral, people doing carry trades on funding. Things like that can probably get you around 30 to 40x leverage in our system. If you're just taking directional bets and you're just buying options because you think the market's going to go up or down, your leverage will likely be closer to around like the 6x leverage standpoint. One of the great features of portfolio margin is obviously the ability to do multi-leg trades. So like in the image that you see there, it's just sort of a mock-up of how you would do a butterfly trade. Butterflies is just a form of a combo trade. And when you do these types of trades, they have a predefined risk exposure. And because of that, we can offer you more margin for that reason. And it just essentially makes you more capital efficient. And so being able to put on 4 different option legs and not post up a lot of collateral is obviously ideal for users. And you can put on, all sorts of exotic combos that you want based on your opinions in the market. Account system. So we'll kind of briefly, real fast, touch on this. I think we talked about this maybe like 3 community calls.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's go over this because this, I think, will help bridge into and clarify kind of the multiple accounts that you can have on Kyan, as well as the initial margin maintenance that people want to maintain for their different accounts.
Yeah. So we have segregated portfolio margin. It's a very loaded phrase. This is something, if you're familiar with Deribit, this shouldn't be anything new, but essentially what that means in a nutshell is that we're going to start off with 3 markets. So we're going to have the ability to trade BTC related perps and options, ETH, as well as ARB. So that's 3 different markets that you can trade. Within each one of these, you will have portfolio margin. So for BTC perps and BTC options, they will be combined from a risk standpoint to create a margin account. And you'll have the same thing for ETH and ARB. So essentially, you will have, when you come to our system, you'll have 3 margin accounts. And these are segregated. So if you have money in your BTC account, essentially, and let's say that you want to trade BTC options and BTC perps, and then you open up some random position on an ETH trade. So you transfer some money over to your ETH side, and you put on a trade, and that gets liquidated. That is completely segregated from your BTC side. So they have no relationship to each other. You can move money freely internally as a transfer between these accounts. So it's very seamless. It's basically just a ledger entry, right, of moving money from one margin account to the other, super fast. and then you can instantly use that money. And again, since we're talking about liquidations, the relevance here is that they are segregated, and so money in one account will not be affected by another account.
I
We
guess I
also
have
have
a
the
question
ability
there,
for sub
Tolga.
accounts as well.
Sorry
Yeah,
to cut you off, but
No,
okay, let's say you get liquidated on Bitcoin and your account goes negative, and then you still have ETH and you're totally open. So even though they're separated, am I able to withdraw even though I got liquidated on, let's say
Yeah,
sub account A versus sub account B?
Yeah, you can almost imagine as if they're like three different users, right? Like they don't have any relationship to each other. Now, the relationship is that you control those three accounts, right? But other than that, like, yeah, if you go bankrupt, let's say you just put on some really aggressive positions and the market moves aggressively, and your account goes negative for, say, your ETH account, right? We're not going to take that negative balance away or try to recoup that negative balance from your BTC account. Again, they're treated as completely separate accounts in our system. So, yeah, it's a good question and good point to bring up. But yeah, they're all separated for sure.
Especially for new users that don't necessarily know how the system will work. It probably will be a little foreign for directional approach traders at the very beginning, but
do you want to, like, in one sentence compare this to like what perp traders are used to, like isolated margin?
Yeah, well, like you can
or better yet, let's contrast it, because comparing it's going to be a bit difficult. They're going to operate very much on opposite sides of I think intuitiveness for interaction.
The key words here are the words segregated and portfolio. They kind of mean opposite things, right? Segregated just means that positions are treated or accounts or positions are treated in isolation. They have no relationship to each other. So from a perp standpoint, if you ever went to an exchange and did an isolated margin trade, you do that trade, you can 100x on a trade, right? But it's an isolated margin trade and you still have money in your account, your position can still get liquidated, right? But it doesn't touch the money in your account. It has no relationship to each other. When that isolated margin position gets liquidated, they close out that trade for you, and then it's done, right? The money that was allocated for that isolated margin, like that 100x trade, is sort of earmarked for that trade, right? And there's no other money that can be touched because of that. Portfolio margin talks about a cross spectrum around whatever you're holding in your portfolio. So now that means multiple positions, multiple assets, right? And so the way that we break the term portfolio up in our system is by determining whether or not you're in a specific product, right? So BTC is one product, ETH is another product. And then within each of those, you have portfolio margin. And so what we're trying to say there is BTC options and BTC perps all relate to each other as one risk, right? Now, if you wanted to come to us and you want to just do a simple like perp trade in BTC, and you had no other interest in doing anything else with options, that would essentially act as a segregated, isolated margin perp trade. That it would kind of basically look the same and feel the same if you went to another exchange and did an isolated margin trade, because essentially whatever money you put into that BTC account and whatever you put towards that that perp trade, that's the only money that you're going to have at risk. Hopefully that answered the question, Denton. I wasn't sure if I touched on. Okay.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did well.
I think so. Yeah. Sometimes I start ranting and start going off on like tangents and like sometimes I realize I'm like I don't know if
people like the people like the.
I wanted to take care of the callers that are still not used to this term, portfolio margin.
Yeah, as a disclaimer, switching from like if you're just a directional perp trader and you're trying to get into options and you haven't been into options before, there's a learning curve here. There's no way around it, right? This is, and I'm sure as most of you have probably known, that options don't necessarily act exactly like perps. They are kind of their own product in their own respect, right? They move in different ways, sometimes as expected, sometimes not, right? And I know a lot of traders when they kind of get introduced to options, they look at it in terms, they try to make sense of it in terms of directionality, right? Like if I buy a call, I want the market to go up. If I buy a put, I want the market to go down. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think everyone starts off with sort of that stepping stone. And options are a bit more than that. And so as you try to learn more about the options, you'll start to appreciate the effects of portfolio margin. And so that can be a little tricky. That is a disclaimer I want to kind of mention here. There is a lot of education that is kind of required to get the full flexibility or the full flex of margin usage, right? Portfolio margin usage. And so this will kind of segue into like risk. We talked about leverage. Now, one thing that's very similar to all exchanges that use margin is if you are using margin, you can get liquidated, right? That basically means your position's larger than the amount of equity you hold, or capital or collateral that you hold in the system. And that means that at some point your position moves against you, you can get liquidated. And so this is going to be no different. So if you're a perp trader, you know this too, right? Market goes down and you're long perps, you're going to feel pain. If you have too much leverage, you're going to get liquidated, right? And there's a liquidation price usually for a perpetual. In our system, we don't have a liquidation price. That's because your portfolio can have a lot of assets. And so we can't just give you a price at which something gets liquidated. It's a bit impossible to do that, because if you have 5 different assets, or let's say you have 4 different options plus a perp, we don't know what the price of that portfolio of those positions are going to be at the time of liquidation. So we use something called the IM and the MM ratio. And so essentially what these are, IM and MM basically stand for initial margin and maintenance margin. And what we do, if you look at like the second line item here on the slide, we basically take the IM and the MM, and these are risk values. These are numbers that our system pumps out that says, okay, based on your portfolio or your positions that you have, this is the amount of capital you need, right? And then we divide that by the amount of capital you actually have. And that creates a ratio. And so that ratio essentially guides and allows users to do certain things and triggers certain processes in our system. The main one that you want to focus on for today in terms of liquidation is going to be the MM ratio. The MM ratio is basically your maintenance margin. It's the amount of money that you need, the minimum amount of money you need to carry the positions that you currently own. And so if that number is, say, $200 and the amount of equity you have in your account is $200, you would have a margin ratio of 100%. So this is the critical number here. The percentage is 100. Anything higher than 100, your account essentially goes into liquidation, right? And so that's the way that you'll judge the health of your account in our system. There is no single liquidation price again, so it's this maintenance margin number that you always want to keep an eye on. That's the number that you're the most interested in, right? And that's the number that you're going to use to try to reduce risk, manage your risk, etc. So let's talk about what happens when you get to a margin ratio, maintenance margin ratio of 100%. So this basically means that your account has gotten into liquidation. So you took on some positions, you either chose not to manage them or you forgot to manage them. Maybe the market moved aggressively and you weren't in front of the computer to reduce risk. It can be a plethora of reasons, right? We've all been there, I guess. So once that happens, we have to take your positions in your account and start to reduce the risk. And so the key word here I'm using is reduce risk. And the reason why I want to say that is because it's not always that we're going to close out your trades. And so essentially the first thing that we want to do when we put you into liquidation, we're going to clear out any position or any orders you have in the order book, and we're going to take control of your account. So essentially the only options that you have in terms of actions that you can take, actionable items, is to make a deposit or to transfer money into your account. Other than that, you lose your ability to trade. And so what we're doing is we're essentially taking over the trading process for you, and we're going to liquidate your positions in your account systematically, right? So how do we do this? Yeah, portfolios can be of different combinations, different flavors, right? Everyone's going to have different exposures. And so we have to find a common ground of how we systematically reduce the exposure. The first thing that we want to do is we want to look at your delta exposure. if we can simply delta hedge your exposure, we will do that instead of trading options. Delta hedging and using perps is a very effective way to reduce exposure without having to get out of the option. Sometimes options have large slippage. Maybe the market's not deep enough. Maybe the market's moving really fast. And because options aren't as liquid as perps, it can be very effective to just delta hedge the exposure, the directional exposure, and then manage the position moving forward. So a couple things can happen. We can either delta hedge and your account gets healthy, or we delta hedge and your account still isn't healthy, right? Once you get into that state where it's still not healthy, or you didn't have a directional exposure to begin with, so we have nothing to hedge, we can get into decomposing your portfolio, right, into different pieces. So we break your portfolio up into three major categories, which is peripherals, spreads, and synthetics. So what do we mean by these three? We'll start with spreads. Spreads are just vertical spreads. So we look through your account and we identify what types of vertical spreads does this user have on. We look for synthetics. Synthetics are basically, we touched on this on a different call, but synthetics are synthetic exposures of the underlying. So if you're synthetically long or synthetically short the underlying, that basically means you have a long or short directional exposure in the underlying asset. And so those are very ideal positions to kind of segregate because they're easily delta hedged. Then there's peripherals. Peripherals are sort of like the random positions you have in your portfolio that are not in combination with anything. So we treat them in isolation and we look at each one of those individually. And so now we have sort of a decomposition of your portfolio, and we can then figure out individually where is the risk in your portfolio? What is holding the largest risk in your portfolio? And we rank everything, right? From the riskiest positions to the least riskiest positions. Synthetics will be the least riskiest because we know we can delta hedge that for a really efficient margin level. So what we do is we sort of, even though that directionality might have a margin to it, we know we can easily hedge it. So we sort of kind of put it to the side because we know we can deal with that later. Then we start going through your trades. So we'll maybe start liquidating your short positions in your options. And so as we start liquidating those positions, those typically hold the highest margin levels. Short peripheral positions, we start closing out. Now, as we start closing out, a couple things can happen. You can reintroduce directional exposure, which we don't want. Or we can maybe even directly get into a healthy margin state. Now, if we get into a healthy margin state, liquidation is done. We're not going to touch the rest of your positions. Now, if you're still not healthy, we're going to try to delta hedge you again. So maybe the short positions that we were trying to close out reintroduced a delta exposure. So we can re-hedge your portfolio, and we'll see where your margin levels are at. And so we continue this process through this hierarchy, right, of highest risk positions to lowest risk. And as we keep closing them out, we keep delta hedging and we keep looking at the margin levels of your account. And once it reaches that healthy level, we instantly stop. So what is the healthy level? Healthy level in this case is the initial margin level. So initial margin is usually the minimum capital you need when you initialize a position. And so when we try to liquidate you, we try to get you to that number. It creates a little bit of a buffer from the next time you get liquidated if you don't manage your account. So that way you're not falling into this like cascading liquidation process, right? We'll liquidate you once and the likelihood of you getting liquidated again in that day is probably minimal unless the market's moving, very aggressively. I'll kind of stop there. I think that's a lot that I just said. I want to cross-check with you guys, make sure that.
No, somebody in the Telegram said, will there be backstop liquidity program, or does Kyan deal with the liquidations? So, I mean, Kyan takes over your account, keep it simple, right? They take over your account, delta hedge for you, or unwind your positions for a partial liquidation, bringing your margin back into the right, back into the green instead of the red. And then if you're mega screwed and you go bankrupt, they'll liquidate your total portfolio. But the idea here is that they'll delta hedge first before you get mega screwed. And most users should only have a partial liquidation, not a full liquidation.
Yeah. There's something to, I'm not sure if it's on this slide or where it might be. Another thing we talked about that we wanted to address was like, how are you liquidating? So who are you interacting with to close these positions out when we liquidate you? So there's no auction system. There's no preferential treatment of like liquidations. They don't work any differently than regular orders in our system. So essentially what we do is we mark the fair value of your assets, and then we gradually add an incentive to the fair value, and we post these orders directly on the order book via limit orders. So there's no wicking in the market. These will be very orderly processed orders, and we will increment them based on some predefined metrics to basically continually add incentive to the value of that trade to a point where the most likely counterparty becomes the order book itself, where we just cross the order book, right? So if we're trying to sell an option, we will likely cross the bid, and the matching engine will just match them off together, and then the trade is done. And so this means that any person providing liquidity in our system as a maker or just posting limit orders has the ability to capture other users' liquidations, right? And because we're adding an incentive, right, there's an incremental incentive to the liquidation. Essentially, if we're crossing people's bid or ask, you're likely getting a favorable price, right? And you're doing us a service as well, because we're able to get out of these trades for the user, and sort of ends up being a win-win for the maker and the exchange, right? I think the only loser here is really the person being liquidated. But the hope is that by doing this, we incentivize even further deeper books, tighter spreads. And so the effect of liquidation is hopefully minimized on users. The orders are very public, and they're done with everyone on the exchange or everyone on the order book. And so hopefully that creates a more fair environment versus having some sort of preferential treatment for liquidation processes. I know in the past, I've worked on liquidation bots before, and you start to get in these gas wars where you're sort of fighting for gas to try to capture the liquidations. You have none of that with us, right? It's just straightforward. Post some orders on the order book. Either you're going to get it from a regular trader, or it could be from the liquidation engine itself even. Post-liquidation checks. Yeah, so we can talk about that. So let's assume that now we've gotten your account healthy. You get control of your account back, right? Whatever positions you still have left, you can manage them. All functionalities restored. So essentially talking about trading and withdrawals. Everything is essentially re-enabled for your account. As Marty mentioned, there are some scenarios where someone might be bankrupt. This is essentially the case where your equity now is negative after closing all your positions. If this happens, we have an insurance fund, which is the backstop. So we will still, even if your account is bankrupt, we will continue to close your trades against the order book. We will do this so long as the insurance fund has capital to backstop the trade. So even though we know your account's negative, we know there's capital to backstop it. And so we'll continue to do the trades, and we can still guarantee the counterparty who's filling on the order to be able to get to check some, right? To make sure that our system is solvent, right? We'll always have that insurance fund backstop. I think that's it.
I guess it's worth to mention, I don't know if I missed it, but if you are in liquidation, Kyan takes over your account, and the only function you can do is deposit to bring your ratios back down. That's the only function you can do. Your account is taken over and locked. You can only deposit, and that's it. That's the only function you can do.
We won't sneak attack you either. Yeah, like there's also, when your account is getting to a liquidation state, you will see pop-up warnings. You will see margin warnings come on the screen, banners, pop-ups. I forgot the exact specs on what exactly they are, but there's a few of them. We're making it very clear to you as a user that you have a position that you need to address, right? And if you don't address it soon, the risk of liquidation is high. So you should see those. We're not not trying to liquidate you in incognito, right? Like we don't want to liquidate you. I think the idea is that we want all traders to sort of be responsible and know, if that trade didn't work out, that you come in and you close it out, right, in a responsible fashion, and reassess your situation, reduce the risk, take a different bet somewhere else. But essentially, it's time for you to sort of make a choice. And if you don't make that choice, we'll make it for you, right?
There's no way to get like emails, right? Can you link your email with your account if you end up doing smart wallets?
I don't want to give any specifics because I'm not in that department, but I do know there has been a lot of conversations about all different sort of notification processes and methods. So I would not be surprised if that is on the list somewhere.
Email, that's old school, dude. Okay, Telegram, like you're getting
maybe Telegram.
liquidated.
Yeah,
you are getting liquidated.
We're gonna continue to enhance that process, and so that you get hammered, right? You're gonna get notifications everywhere before, like it'll be almost impossible for you to not see.
Neuralink just starts going off, dude.
Yeah, we're not in the game of someone coming to our, so like we're not a 100x exchange. Let's also like kind of maybe bring up some differences again between, say, like some perp exchanges and us. We're not here for you to do a 100x trade, right? 100x trades are very low probability trades. The likelihood of you getting liquidated is almost 99.9%, right? Like you're going to get liquidated on most of those style trades. The exchange wants that to happen, right? I don't think the exchange is looking for 100x trades to be successful. We're sort of in a different band camp, right? You can take your bets. You can get leverage and have capital efficiency through options and the portfolio margin that we offer. And the leverage that you get should be plenty, right, to make money. And I think there's a sort of a sweet spot between that portfolio margin gives between sort of maximizing your return and capital efficiency. So to some people who are like, oh, 6x leverage on a perp, that's nothing. Well, depends on what it is you're doing. I mean, 6x leverage on a 70 vol product is still plenty, right? And you don't manage that position, you will still probably get liquidated. And so options, again, will offer different ways to express opinions that are slightly different than perps, right? There's different ways to make money, not just on direction. And so essentially, we talked earlier on the calls, like if portfolio margin is not sort of your native knowledge base, or options aren't your native knowledge base, and just directionality is, the functionality on our exchange will seem limited, right? And that's fine. That's sort of what's going to happen, right? So if you come from perp land and you want to take directional perp bets, or use options for directionality and direction bets, you might find that the degeneracy level on our exchange isn't going to be as high as other exchanges. Now, if you start to come in and start doing more exotic stuff like funding rate arbitrage, when you start to do, playing the RevCon game with that, when you start doing exotic combos, when you start doing like, calendar spreads, or shorting vol. I know Marty loves to short vol. So, doing things like that where, you're delta hedged, but you're taking a directional vol bet. That's when portfolio margin shines. That's where you're going to get leverage that you were missing in other system designs, right? And so that's where we kind of want to encourage users to explore that side of options, because that's where you're going to get the most benefit from our system.
Yeah, big stupid nose.
Vol is meant to be sold. Yeah.
Let's get into some of these PM calculators. Let's get away from liquidating people.
Yeah, I know. It's a harsh topic.
Let's talk
but
about.
I mean, at least we're trying to be fair. We're trying to say that we're not taking your money, right? We're not. I know, like a lot of those exchanges, they'll just take your entire purse, right? You get liquidated. Yeah. It's like gone.
100x. 2 seconds later, it's gone.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to the content guys earlier today about like maybe me or someone writing just like a personal piece, like an exploration to kind of explain from V1 to now what is V4. And like that is one of the things, like V1 was created because the other exchanges that existed at the time, there were only a couple, were either hosing the LPs or they didn't have altcoins. And we thought like everyone trades altcoins. Like there's Bitcoin and then there's this sea of everything else. And you can only trade options for BTC, for ETH. And at the time there was Hedgic also. And so we were like, let's make one where you can trade everything and there's no house, you know, you're trading against one another. And then with V2, it was kind of the same model, right? Like not the same model, but the same idea. The traders are trading against other people who are directional traders who are choosing, you know, either to take a direction for a long period of time and sit in one of the vaults, or to purchase options and trade on shorter time frames that the vaults allowed. And you know, there was no house other than the individuals. If you were the LP, you were the house essentially, you know. And we move on to V3, again, very similar architecture where like Premia itself, the organization or the application is not the house. The users and participants have always been the house, offering orders in the order books, participating in the vaults, taking both sides of those trades. Moving on to V4, nothing changes.
Well, no,
a lot changes.
Portfolio margin.
A lot changes, but still, we are, you know, not the house. We're not, unlike other exchanges, we're not here, and even less so. You know, we've taken a back seat to, you know, pricing and things like that. Whereas in the past, we had built-in pricing mechanics or mechanisms to provide people with, you know, quote unquote fair market pricing or average market pricing to use as a baseline.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess one thing before we roll into PM, I guess one thing, if you are a newbie trader and if you are looking to use options directionally for just straight directional, then you should probably just look at call and put spreads. You have like a defined P&L. You have, if it goes above the top end strike or the bottom end strike, then you profit 100%. Like that would be, I always point people to that way. And it's more of a price game than a vol game, because sometimes you can have a call option, the price goes in your favor, vols get absolutely nuked post event, and you end up losing money because you overpaid for the option. Where if you had a call spread where you're long and short another, you can just play more of a, if price went above X, you profit 100%.
People buy, you know, puts or something, and then the market goes down 10%, and they somehow didn't even make money on the event, right? Because the event itself was priced in higher, right, from a risk standpoint than the actual move in the market. The implied volatility might have implied a 15% move, right? And if the market only moves 10% and that vol gets crushed, you didn't make the money, right? So you ended up losing. You ended up being right in the direction and ended up still losing. And I can see how that's a very confusing and stressful process, you know, for new traders. So great point on like the vertical spreads. Call spreads and put spreads should be a new trader's best friend. And portfolio margin will give you the ability to kind of do that in size and make the risk reward attractive, right? So even though it's a defined risk profile where you have it, you know, the exact amount of money you could lose or the exact amount you can make, because of that defined profile, we give you more leverage for that.
Yeah, and it's easy. You can price it on a napkin. You know, you could do you can do your P&L on a fucking piece of paper. You don't need some crazy complex equation to figure that one out. So that was just a topic that I thought about.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think on the last call as well, someone had asked a question about funding and how to like do funding arbitrage. And so we talked about synthetic exposures. Synthetic exposures are also a good one, where like if funding is too high and you just want to be long BTC or short BTC, you could do it through options. You'll have the exact same payoff where you're long a call and you're short a put, the same strike, same expiration. And what that does is the P&L of that position is literally 1-to-1 is if you're along the underlying. And so then that gives you an actual, and that's another trade there that gives you essentially a long or a short directional exposure. And the reason why you'd want to do that, it could be for funding reasons, right? Maybe funding has gotten extremely high, and you can do the trade much cheaper via options. So different things you can do. You can still do directional trades, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's definitely so much more to explore, and so we'd encourage everyone to kind of keep learning and keep trying different trades. The combo page, which we talked about last week, can be everyone's best friend. It's very easy to digest what a butterfly is, what a calendar spread is, what makes them make money and lose money, and doing those trades through our system, we've made it as easy as possible. So, PM calculation considerations. So this part is going to get into some details. We might lose some of you. For you advanced people, this is going to be some useful information. So there's three main components in our risk model. This is going to be very similar to Deribit. In fact, it's actually one-to-one with Deribit. Our system is risk models are not meant to be innovative, right? They're supposed to be standardized and battle tested, right? And so that's sort of the pedigree of risk models. And this situation is going to be very similar to that, where Deribit's model is very robust and has been battle tested. And they cover all sorts of different risks in their system. And so it's a very complete risk model. And so for that reason, we've adopted a lot of pretty much everything that they had in their risk model itself. When you figure out a portfolio's risk, there's something called a risk matrix. And that matrix is just a shocking of the spot price and the IV. So these are the two primary inputs of what makes options worth what they are. And so when you stress those values and create like hypothetical situations where if the market went down 10% or up 10%, you can see what happens to a user's portfolio. And then that gives us essentially a matrix that tells us where's the max pain for this user? Where's the max pain for this portfolio? And that max pain is the number that we focus on because that's the number that we want to make sure you can cover. Then on top of that number, we have an additional two risks. One's called roll risk and the other is delta risk. Roll risk is simply the risk of options expiring and the risk in your portfolio changing drastically. And so a simple example would be a calendar spread where say you're long the front month and you're short the back month. And so this calendar spread gives you a lot of capital efficiency. But the problem is the front month option, when that expires, the only position you're going to be left with is a short position on the back month. And so most traders, as you get more advanced into options, you have to learn how to manage your portfolio of risk when you have positions in different expirations. Because as soon as one expires, it changes the composition of the risk composition of your portfolio. And so you have to manage that. If you don't manage it, we have to consider that a risk to the exchange. And so that's what roll risk is. Essentially, when we see that there is a very large margin jump for an account upon an expiration of an option, we will bake that into your margin requirements. Typically, I guess, I forgot the exact number. I believe it's a couple days before expiration. You start to see your margin number increase because we're basically telling you, hey, you need to roll this risk. You need to manage your position because at expiration, you need more money, right? And so that's what that number basically compensates us for. Delta risk is essentially the directionality of your portfolio. It's that simple. When the markets are getting very finicky and volatility is high, and we're seeing really large cascading events where we see this from time to time when the markets get heated, where you'll see like 10% drops, right, in a matter of like minutes to like within an hour, right? And that movement is not helpful when you're trying to liquidate someone. And so when a user has a lot of directional exposure that we have to manage while we're trying to close your trades out, this can affect your P&L the most, not really the volatility. It's the delta risk. And so if you have a very large position on, you will start to get penalized and require additional capital for that. And basically what we're saying is the larger directional exposure you have, the more risk we have trying to get out of your trade because the market's going to move, or we're going to run through the liquidity on the order book. And when we do that, you're not going to get a great price. And because of that, we need to make sure you have extra money in your account so you don't go bankrupt. So that kind of covers that risk. And so these three things kind of bundled together, and we give you a nice printed number, which is the IM number or the MM number. We do have endpoints though for the advanced users if they want to see these actual calculations or like the outputs to these calculations of like, what is my matrix risk? What is my roll risk? Maybe you want to compare it with derivatives or something. We do have those endpoints for users, but for all UI users, you likely will not see these three categories anywhere on the screen.
I think a big one to mention that I think maybe a lot of people missed or you skimmed over is that it is one-to-one with Deribit. So being a DEX with a risk engine or a risk matrix, the same one-to-one Deribit, it allows you to put on a lot more trades. If you go look at other DEXs, they're maybe giving you 50% of Deribit. They're giving you 20% of Deribit because they haven't actually gone out and built this type of system. The other thing worth mentioning is that a lot of the other guys are only doing two-legged options. So you can only do that call spread or put spread or that synthetic. You're not able to do a multi-leg with a perp hedge all in one, not one click, but one basket, I would say. So that's another big selling point that, I think I got some text that you were a little too much of a gigabrain, so I was dumbing it down a little bit.
No, of course.
It's better.
Running.
Okay, it's
That
better.
show
The most legs in DeFi.
UI real quick.
It's
The most
better,
legs in
and
DeFi.
it's
I love
better
that.
because you have better use of your capital, and you can do multi-legs. You can do 4 legs, you can do 8 legs, and then you can also add that perp hedge all in one basket, and it all works together. Somebody asked,
Marty,
what is the gas usage of the PM calcs, and is there a portfolio size limit due to that?
No and no. The short answers. So risk calculations are done off chain because the computation is extremely heavy. It's very difficult to do those on chain without there being significant bottlenecks to your system and major limitations. And so we're trying to make sure that we don't sacrifice proper functionality of our system. Risk engine being sort of the heart of all of how the system works. The fair value of all prices. So this was touched on in the Block Shoals conversation. They come from third parties. They come from Chainlink and Block Shoals for IV, and they're all verified on chain. So if you want to know what the state of an account is, or what the calculation would be based on the mark prices of the assets, you could do that through the oracles, right, and get the mark prices from them, which we have as well. So it's fully transparent.
I think that access to that data is good as well, that you can get those oracle prices from the exchange. I think that'll be good for a lot of retail turning pro-tail, having access to that data on their own book or their own side as well, instead of having to pay for it.
If you're writing bots, it's probably a great thing to do is to use the mark prices of assets and you use that as a litmus test, right? To see if the order you're about to put is above or below fair value, right? And so we provide that information. We have the vol surface and the index prices from Chainlink, so you have access to that information through our system. So super helpful. Marty, the combos, I think you weren't on the call last week.
I listened.
You listened? Okay. Yeah. For anyone who's wants to kind of learn more about the combos, there's a whole episode we had on combos alone. There's a lot there, for sure.
Yeah, our last call was about that.
Why PM is so crucial. When we're talking to, everyone who's kind of very familiar with options, trades them on Deribit, and also kind of dips their toes in crypto options, or I should say on-chain option and venues, PM and the release of that is a huge thing. Why is it so crucial? And, what is it that makes this kind of the holy grail of options for on-chain options to work, quote unquote? finally.
Yeah, I think that's basically where we land, right? With PM. I mean, I think these are kind of these are topics or kind of reasons why we discussed why we love PM so much. We did this on our original PM call, and so the risk adjusted returns that you get are going to be superior, right? We have tier 1 exchange competitiveness now. We're 1-to-1 with Deribit on a risk standpoint. We can't be any more clear that like we're trying to focus on capital efficiency, which is something that has plagued the options side in DeFi for a very long time, and it has its own bottlenecks and pros and cons, which is why probably it took so long. But ultimately, you realize that options require portfolio margin to be as competitive and capital efficient to be able to use them. Fees. I know we haven't really touched on fees at all, but our fees are also competitive to tier 1 exchanges. And so you're not going to have large fees to deal with. Gas costs. You don't have gas costs to post orders. You don't have gas costs to calculate risk. These are huge bottlenecks, right? For, as the listener was saying, like if you have a large portfolio, that's a lot of computational power that you have to do. 10-leg portfolios. Let's imagine you're like a vol trader, right? Like 10 legs on, and you're just buying and selling vol on the surface, the vol surface. That's a lot for us to compute, right? And we're just not there yet to be able to compute that on chain. For people to be able to constantly check their risk and make sure that they're doing okay. For us to be able to provide accurate values to you at all times. So we're really focusing on sort of that tier 1 exchange experience. We haven't really. Did we ever talk about one-click trading at all? I know that's been something we've talked about as a feature, but I'm not sure.
I think it was assumed.
It was assumed. Okay.
I think at this point it was assumed because everybody has
trading. It's been but we can get into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it just dawned on me now. Like we didn't, as Marty said, like I think it's become the new standard in DeFi when you're trying to use an active trading platform. One-click trading obviously removes the need to kind of sign every single action that you take on the exchange. So if you've ever used an exchange that allows you to set up one-click trading, there's quite a few of them nowadays. I'm sure everyone has realized how useful that is when you have the screen up and you need to quickly do a trade. You don't have to sit there and pull out your ledger or click on MetaMask notifications. You can essentially just press buy, sell, and instantly the orders go through, right? Saves you a lot of time and headache. So that's going to be extremely useful for traders. And then the combos, right? We got combos for days. We got more legs than anyone else. We should trademark that. That's that's a great.
We got legs.
We got legs
for days.
I think that's a huge selling point.
Every day is leg day at Kyan.
When people come and ask like, oh, well, what's the difference? It's like, well, in every other platform, you can get 2 legs and you can't add a perp hedge on top of that at the exact same time. So if you could do 8 legs and a perp hedge all in one basket, then that is huge. Or, do a condor 4 legs or a butterfly 3 legs and add a perp hedge all at the same time. That's a huge improvement than any other offering on the market. I'm not even sure a lot of them even have perp hedging. Like I think it's separate, if that makes sense. Like, oh, you can have perps, but it's not in 1 PM. Yeah.
No, we combine it all together. It's great.
Yeah.
A little extra work.
We got legs. We got legs.
We got legs.
It takes a lot of time. You know what I'm thinking here is, you guys remember the Deribit promotional marketing ad?
Yeah, models.
We need that.
We need that, but like with a leg based.
It's just like I combo trades, but it's ASMR, just like boom shouts of legs.
Dude, I watched that video like 6 times in a row, and I didn't learn
Of course
shit.
we did.
I guarantee you, no one's gonna learn anything about combos if we
have more
a
legs.
marketing ad like that.
We got
It's not,
They like
the,
it.
the best is Aston Martin used one. It's like some hot chick, and it's like, we know you're not first, but does it matter?
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah.
Classic.
While we were talking about legs, did we get into this kind of idea of derivative money Legos and being able to leg in, leg out, put on different combinations of pieces? So I think that's one of the more interesting things, that you can kind of build strategies to go with other strategies. So it's like,
that's a great point.
Take the small,
So, like,
take the land brick, and you build your little support, and then you can connect that, and you can take little pieces out and move it on. Or move it out.
Like change of opinion, right? Like, let's say that you put on a trade and you think that the market, I think we talked about this on the combo one a little bit, where, like, let's say that you want the market to go up, and then you think that, okay, well, it did what you wanted a little faster than you expected. And you think, okay, I think the directionality is still up, but I think we're going to consolidate here for a little bit. And so I don't want to pay all this time decay on my options to have this directional exposure. Maybe I want to hedge this or reestablish a new combo trade, right? So what you can do is adjust your position. And so effectively what you'd be doing is maybe taking a combo trade that you already initially started with and adding to it, right? Or taking out pieces. And what that essentially does is will change the risk profile. It'll kind of maybe align better with your opinions, and then you can morph your trade. So I know, Marty, when you're talking about, like, some exchanges have very limited, like, 2-leg limitations, you have flexibility to leg in or out of combos just as well as have the ability to do them atomically or together, right? And so that's a really important feature in our system, where you have choice in how you want this to be executed. We can either guarantee the combo trade for you, or if you feel like you don't want that trade right now, or you want to get into it, like, slowly in a different fashion, like you want to leg into it, right? Maybe you want to do the call spread, but instead of doing the call spread today, you just want to buy the call option. And then when the market goes up, instead of getting rid of that call option, now you just sell a call option. So now you make a call spread. So you don't have to do the call spread all at once. You could just leg into it. You could leg into a butterfly. So there's that money Lego concept, this ability to sort of, well, I don't tell money Legos, I call it like position Legos, right? You can,
we've already had money Legos.
Position.
Like, I think of the money Lego thing, back to, like, DeFi protocols stacking on top of each other. And this is more just like you said, it's positional Legos, it's
money mega blocks.
Yeah.
People will explore as you get used to options. You'll notice that options the payoff of how your portfolio pays you off can look all sorts of different ways. It can look S-shaped. It can kind of like peak at some point and then go down drastically, right? There's all different types of shapes you can generate in terms of your P&L output. You can limit the downside. You can limit the upside. There's all sorts of positions you can add to your portfolio that kind of create a new P&L curve for you, hypothetical P&L curve. And that's the cool part about options, is the payoff structures can be basically any shape you want. And that's the cool part about it. When you start to learn about how, like, adding a new leg to your portfolio will affect the payoff structure, you really start to get more granular control of saying, oh, I think this market's going to go up, but I don't think it's going to pass X, right? Or I think this market's going to go to X, and I think it's going to be there for Y amount of time, right? Yeah. And so now you can just express all these little different opinions on how you think the market's going to move, and it gives you so much more control than, say, owning a perp. Like, if you own a perp and we're in a consolidation period, you're just going to be bleeding funding the whole time. And you might be sitting there going, okay, I knew this was going to be a consolidation period. I knew this was going to take 7 days to resolve, but I want to still hold on to my perp just in case. Well, you're just bleeding out on that, right? And then maybe you might want to sit there and actually try to play a consolidation process, but without missing the upside. Because with perps, what happens if you take that trade off and you walk away from your computer, market rips another 10%? You just kind of missed out, right? With options, you could then do the call spread, right? You go from the call option to then the call spread where you sell the call, and then you could do it in such a way that if the market rips another 10%, you actually still make money. So there's a lot more flexibility with options that people will find that you can't get with perps. So
I explain it that you can build off any payoff graph you could ever imagine with options. Whatever you can dream of, you can make it happen. With perps, it's just up or down and you get screwed. But if you wanted to play vol, if you wanted to play directional, if you wanted to play exactly a price at a future date, you could put on like a butterfly in December. And if it's exactly, 120K, you can get some, some crazy return, like on your initial premium. You can get like sometimes, a 10 to 30x fucking return on if you were exactly at that price at expiry. So that's
you can also make bets on events. Like, let's say that there's a binary event happening. We know president's going to speak, and we think the market's implying that the move is going to be 10%. Well, you can make a bet against that, right? You think it's going to be more or less than 10%, and you can express that opinion, right? And so that's a different opinion than saying, I think the market's going up or down, like you said, up or down, right? Like, what if you're like, I have no clue what's going to happen, but it's going to be massive, right? That is an expression that you can do with options that you cannot do with perps.
Yeah, or it's not going to be massive. It's going to stay in this range.
Right. Everyone's speaking this up. This is going to be a nothing burger, right? And so I'm just going to sell vol, right, all day long. Everyone's just implying a massive move and nothing's going to happen. Or maybe it's just not going to be as high, right? Market's implying a 10% move and you're like, this thing's going to maybe go down 3% tops, right? And then you sell vol. And so, there are just so many things. And I think, I try to encourage people to kind of keep learning about options, because I think what got me into it, and probably a lot of people, is when you start to realize the flexibility of how you get to express opinions. I kind of maybe give like a gambling analogy.
That 99% of gamblers quit before they make it big.
No, I was just going to talk about like games, right? Like, at the end of the day, trading options is gambling too, right? We're speculating just as much as buying a directional position. You're just speculating. But like the difference is like going to a casino and playing, blackjack or like roulette versus say craps, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this before. You're playing different
craps
games.
has way more like, like you play on a craps table and you start to learn how to play craps. You realize how many different ways you can place bets and make money, right?
Yeah.
The flexibility in terms of the bets you make in craps is enormous, right? In blackjack, it's hit or stay, stay, right? Like,
or double,
21 or bust, 21 or, it's very just binary, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that. This is a great game. But just to kind of give that analogy of like, I remember trying to learn craps the first time, but then the moment I learned it, I was like, this game is way more interesting. I can do so many more different things. Because I remember like hearing like, I don't need to go on a sidebar here, but like when you're at a casino and you start to hear people cheering and stuff, it's always a craps table. Maybe sometimes blackjack too, but like more times than not, it's a craps table because everyone wins at a craps table when it's hot. So, but anyways, yes, that's sort of the sidebar analogy I wanted to give. If people aren't familiar with
options are craps.
Options are craps, yeah.
So we won't spend too much time on this slide. We went over this on the last presentation. If you want more details kind of on combo trade and hedging with perps, you can go to our YouTube channel, check out the last video that's there. That goes over in more detail. But let's talk more about just the hedging. Let's talk more about how people are going to do that within the UI. Maybe how you would hedge a perp with some of these combo trades and how exactly this will work for a user.
Yeah. So there's kind of like 3 sections here. You can see like the first section is the choose a strategy. Those are just predefined strategies. These are the most popular types of combo trades that are out there. There's tons of information on them. If you just kind of quickly Google calendar spread, put spread, straddle, things like that. You'll find tons of information on what they are, with their payoff structure. The other area is the Greeks. So again, another like sort of cornerstone to how options work is we use Greeks to sort of define how your portfolio is going to behave in the marketplace. And so if you're not familiar with Greeks, I highly suggest finding the plethora of information out there that shows you what Greeks are and what they mean. They're extremely important because a lot of our risk metrics and how IM and MM are calculated in our system basically depend on these Greeks, right? These Greeks tell you what your risk is in your portfolio. And so in this case, they show you what the risk is of the particular combo trade that you're trying to do. Then on the bottom section is the builder itself. And so let's say I want to, in this case, I templated some sort of butterfly, right? And so it pre-populates 3 different options in there for me. Let's say I wanted to change the legs on the butterfly. Maybe I wanted to change the, like the different strikes that I'm using. Maybe I wanted to find one on a different expiration. You get full granularity and you get to kind of control and toggle and essentially create the position that you want. The templates above are just kind of pre-population templates to kind of allow you to just quickly get that the data on the bottom for you, and then you can kind of more granularly control what it is that you're trying to do, what size you're trying to do. You can add a perp, right? If you wanted to, you could maybe add another leg if you wanted to. So there's the full granularity here again. Marty, I know you brought up the perp part.
Who's got legs?
Who's got legs, right? You can add as I forgot what the limitation in our system is. There is an upper limit. So all jokes aside, I think it's somewhere around like 8.
Nobody's doing more than 8 legs.
I don't think so. Yeah,
we support Octomom. We're Octomom.
It's really high. Yeah, and to the point where if you're doing more than 8 legs at once, there's probably a better way to do it.
Octodad. Remember that game, Octodad?
No, I don't. What is Octodad?
You're an octopus who's a dad, and it's really hard to like walk around the house and do things. It's like the tentacles get in the way.
I mean, if you did have, I don't know why you put on 8 legs at once. That would be but look, in all honesty, there are certain scenarios where maybe you have a portfolio and you, let's just say that you're like, you know what, I need to get out of all my trades right now. I don't want anything on my books. And I have 6 legs on, right? I was vol trading and I just want it all off. Instead of going to each one of those books individually and trying to close out your trades one by one, this screen can give you the ability to take all 6 legs, put them in, and in a single click, get rid of all your positions. So all jokes aside, there is a usefulness in more so on trying to get out of trades than getting into them.
I guess the other thing there, right? If you're in a multi-leg position and you have, I don't know, 6 or 7, right? And you want to unwind, right? If you have to go click trade, unwind each at a time, it's really, really hard. And your margin might not even let you, depending on how much margin, how much cash you have versus how many positions you have. So if you're able to just combo trade and get them all off at one basket, one click, it's a much better process than trying to go into the book and doing, one over here, one over here, one over there, 1, 1, 1, or 5, 5, 5 to get out of your total position. So much better experience.
There's also one more element in there. Let's go back. I just want to touch on one more thing. Let's say you're like a size trader and you want to do a call spread, right? But like that's the only trade you want to do and you want to do it in size. We have the RFQ option. So a lot of our market makers will be quoting on the books, and that's sort of where you want to interact. But if your trade for some reason is larger than what's available on the books, you can simply just send an RFQ. And so then you'll just get an easier experience of just trying to get your trade off than trying to manage orders, right? And trading against the market makers multiple times to try to leg into like the size that you want. The RFQ offers you the ability to just do it in one chunk, right? And so all our market makers will be listening to the RFQs. And so they are the same people. Essentially, the idea is that the RFQ is reserved for people doing size, and it's for size that's larger than what's available on the order book. But that's there. So for some of you big whales out there who want to try to flex and put on large positions, you'll be able to use that functionality.
Yes, my little anonymous dog who
My body is ready.
keeps asking to let me leg in, leg out 50 to 100 BTC orders. There's your tab for you right there. Okay.
Yeah, right there.
There
You
you
get
go.
in and out with ease, right?
So this is a perfect bridge into our last slide of today on what exactly this means for Kyan. We talked about, risk engine liquidations. We had a whole presentation on portfolio margin, but what does it mean for Kyan? And we can kind of go through each of these key points that we have here, starting with partial collateralization.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys want to touch on here? There's all sorts of. We could just go through each of them. Partial collateralization is the cornerstone of PM, right? Essentially, one of the things, Cozy on the earlier part of the call was talking about the evolution of Premia and sort of how we evolved. One of the major underpinnings that's changing here is the difference between fully collateralized positions and partially collateralized. That is the single biggest component that's changing here, right? Via portfolio margin. Partially collateralized options are extremely efficient from a capital standpoint. And while being fully collateralized ensures an exchange cannot be insolvent, we found it to be too cost prohibitive to get users to come and do options trades. The amount of collateral that was required for positions is just too much with options. And so we needed to move towards the partial collateralization side. And to be honest, this is how traditional finance has done it. This is how options trading has been for many, many, many years, right? I'm pretty sure the reason why they've never gone to full collateralization in traditional finance is because it just becomes too cost prohibitive to actually use options. And so that kind of bleeds into capital efficiency, and that also even bleeds into deeper liquidity. And so this is going to be an interesting point here, is that when you have a system that's partially collateralized and you have margin, you give market makers the ability to provide quotes en masse for all strikes and expirations, they can afford to put larger size. The larger size gives a deeper liquidity and allows users to trade in size on the exchange. This is extremely important, right? All traders, when you go to an exchange, and at least for me personally, this is something that my litmus test, right? When I go to an exchange, the elevator pitch that exchange is making me is how much are your fees, how deep are your books, and how tight are your spreads. Those are the only three things I really care about, right? As the elevator pitch. If you don't have those three things, I won't even spend any more than like 10 minutes on your exchange. Then obviously at some point you care about the performance of the exchange, the reliability, etc. But at first, those are the things that even you need to even get into the door to even entertain that exchange. And so we're trying to cover all of those for a user so they can come to the exchange and go, all right, this passes the sniff test. I want to try to trade on this exchange. Standardizing options. We're not doing anything exotic. I know people have probably heard of. I think the DeFi industry has done a great job in terms of options, of trying to make up names for options. There have been all sorts of different terminologies, different ways to kind of reconfigure what an option is and how it pays off, trying to make all sorts of exotic products to try to allure people to sound different or fancy. We're not doing that. I think there's enough creativity that you can express through standardized options that you don't need to start making up names for options, right? In terms of like what the payoff structure is or how like the actual option works. We have standardized linear options in our system. And then we talk about institutional derivatives and cross collateralization. So this kind of gets into we're trying to focus a little bit more on the institutional side and bringing that institutional flow for all users to benefit. When institutions come in, you get the deeper liquidity, you get the tighter spreads, right? And when you have that, you get more trading, and it allows users to go in and out of markets without a problem, right? And so as a retail user, as a pro-tail user, you want that institutional derivatives liquidity there, right? And cross collateralization. So one of the things that we can now like get into is cross collateralization. So as of right now, our exchange is USDC only. We did this for simplicity because there's a lot of things we have to cover and build. But eventually, the goal is to move that towards a cross collateralized system where you can deposit ETH, BTC, and other altcoin assets.
My body's ready.
Oh man,
It's,
All right.
It's fucking time.
It's a lot, man. There's a lot here. We're doing everything right. The features that we're going to show now are going to be they're going to be great. We're really going to try to flex hard here and try to, I think there's the conversation of at some point Deribit will have to relinquish some of that market share. It will not be Deribit forever and always.
Won't always be 80%.
It won't. And at some point, it's opening the door for people to come in and do something that makes it competitive, that gives people optionality besides Deribit. And so that's been our goal. That's what we're trying to do, right? And ultimately, over the years, the writing's on the wall that you have to beat Deribit or you have to be competitive with them, right? It's kind of been a David and Goliath story with Deribit for so many years with options. And DeFi has, extra difficulties as well with the limitations of being on chain. Those freedoms and those transparencies come with a cost, right? It's been very difficult for us to kind of be just as competitive as them. But I think that gap's closing, and that's sort of what we're trying to do here.
We hit 1.2K on this stream.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest community call ever, right?
Nice.
Yeah, it's the most views
so.
we've had on the community call so far.
It's a reason to get excited.
Yeah.
Our bodies are ready.
Kyan.blue, guys, it's live. You can subscribe for updates on the beta. You can check out the beautiful landing page we have right now.
Yeah, my Twitter was jacked up for the better part of this past week. So if any of you are interested in getting a firsthand look, doing some feature testing, some beta testing, your experience with trading options, shoot me a DM. I'm going to set up a little group chat this week and we're going to get things started. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you for joining us. I know it's been a long one. We'll see you back on Friday.
Damn, over an hour. Wow.
Thank you, everyone.